pile and contained this sentence: "He is going hunting next week, and I wish to heaven he would never return." Mrs. Lemp acknowledged that she had written the letter, but explained that she had done so in an effort to find out who had been tampering with her private papers. She said that the letter was a decoy and had been so placed that her husband would see it if he searched her desk. She acknowledged that he, referred in the letter, was her husband. So the basis of my summation that he was a shit human basically comes from... the fact that, according to testimony, he also forced his son to watch the family's pet monkeys eat canaries.
Shut your mouth.
And that he was fond of slaughtering neighborhood cats.
Oh, that is... Yeah, okay.
Which
you
is the
win.
moment that
I mean, I did not believe you, but that is disgusting.
Right. He claimed that they were keeping him awake. Yes, they are loud, but that's no excuse.
Oh, I know. I'm saying he's not right in his actions, but he's correct in his assessment.
Yes, he is correct in his assessment, but he should...
But that's icky.
Yes.
All right.
But this is also the moment that I said, I'm done with this douche and I don't feel bad about his fate, so...
Don't either. Yeah.
The Lemps were formally divorced in March of 1909.
Who got her clothes, and are they still available?
Lillian received $6,000 a month until she remarried.
That is not bad.
Nope. And full custody of her son.
Good.
Not surprisingly, she never remarried.
Good for her.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to either.
This is what year?
That's 1909.
Dang, okay.
And now for something not so scandalous.
Stay tuned for more scandal sheets after the break. And now, back to the show.
So, Scuzzbucket Billy was so ashamed, or rather, he was so shamed in the papers that he had to run off to the country and build a Swiss chalet.
Oh, so this is when he built it.
Yes.
But so he did not build it for his family.
No.
So can I go into this a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this chalet that Lemp Jr. had built is very, very cool. And so he commissioned architect Guy Norton, who was the official brewery, the head architect of the brewery.
Okay.
He commissioned him to build it in 1911. And the site was on almost 200 acres overlooking the Merrimack River. And the architect, Guy Norton, would have relied on pattern books to create this alpine vernacular structure that was, I would say, definitely unheard of in suburban Missouri. Now, chalets were not unheard of in other parts of the country. Our architect friend, Richard Morris Hunt, designed one in Newport for a woman in the 1860s. And, like a lot of things we talk about pattern books, and Hunt studied architecture in France. So there were different pattern books upon which these chalet designs were based. And there were German periodicals that I, just for fun, and because I'm going to open another beer, I'm going to try to pronounce. All right, here, the beer comes first. And the German periodical that informed the chalets was Architektonisches, which architect is with a K. So Architektonisch. Skizzenbusch. Skizen is spelled just as it sounds, and Busch is B-U-C-H. So maybe not. So Skizzenbusch. Busch. Buch. Oh, I like French, so I say Busch. It's not.
No, it's Buch.
Let's try this all at once. Architektonisch.
Yes.
Ish. Skizzenbuch.
Yeah, there you go. I actually knew how to pronounce something for once.
The Tiroler Hauschen illustrated in this book, this bush. It's not what it is. This leaf was directly inspired by native alpine buildings. Leopold Eidlitz and Richard Upjohn were two of the most prominent architects to design houses influenced by these sources in the 1850s and 60s. FYI, reading from the National Park Service, or what? No, I'm not. I'm reading from the Department of the Interior. Is that the same thing? But it's the write-up. It's the nomination. Excuse me.
National Park Service.
So the chalet, which I have not mentioned yet, the chalet is called Allswell.
Though clearly all was not well.
All was not well.
Yeah.
All was not well. Right. I'm sorry. So it was built by Lemp Jr. in 1911 based on these different pattern books. And the Alpine chalets were built since the 1840s. They enjoyed a vogue since at least then. So they did reconstructions as well. And there was a chalet from Bern, Switzerland, that was reconstructed in the Bois de Boulogne. Which, that's interesting. So I guess like they do at Winter or whatever, Charleston, happens all over the country. You would take a historic mansion and break it, part of it or all of it down and reconstruct it in a different place. But this was from scratch. Allswell was actually, so since it was designed by the brewery architect, it was a very modern construction, because you think of chalets as, right, these dark wood things that have low sloping roofs and fun wood details and ornament. And this one, because it was done by this architect who was more, obviously structurally inclined, the interior was concrete and steel, and it was just sided in cypress, and the detail was added. So it had the picturesque appearance of the house disguises its structure of reinforced concrete and steel. The concrete is finished in a very irregular sand-colored aggregate, that's the rocky stuff, but smoothed out in a white finish around doors and windows. These window surrounds are shaped at the corners and center in somewhat Baroque style, which I have a hard time picturing because it's a chalet, but moving on. The front steps and entry porch are blue-toned terrazzo. Seems early for terrazzo, 1911, but I guess you're getting into deco, and that's a very stable floor material. Massive brackets at the corners of the ground floor and few intermediate locations support the balcony, which runs around 3 sides of the house at the second floor level. The balcony is of reinforced concrete paved with quarry tile. Its balustrades have square posts and flat slats, which are notched in such a way that they form a pattern of circular holes alternating at top and bottom. The entrance is sheltered by a broad shed roof supported by carved brackets. It has elaborately scalloped shingles forming a frieze, a larger version of which also appears on the edges of the main roof and the gables and below the third floor riverside balcony. Luckily for us and for St. Louis and the general architecture, history, population, or people who care, this house still exists. There are gates, so you can't really get to it, at least the front of it, but you can see it from the river, high on a bluff. And there is a very talented young journalist that not only did articles about the Lemps, that I took some information, very helpful information from, but he has a blog that has some really charming old pictures from maybe the 70s of Allswell. And if you are interested in reading any more about the Lemps or St. Louis architecture, he does some really great columns, and his name is Chris Nafziger. He did a 5-article series in St. Louis magazine about the Lemp Brewery, but has additional fun articles about history and architecture, and like I say, included information about Allswell on his blog. But if you just Google Allswell, Alswel, it will come up. And I love this charming thing. I would never have thought, certainly, that it would be in this country, let alone Missouri. It makes more sense in Missouri than it does in the Southeast. However, it is in a suburban neighborhood that, while it does have topography, it's not a mountain. It's still the Midwest, and it's still a little weird and out of place. And I would love to know where else these chalets exist in the United States.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, it was a well-known place. So where Allswell is attracted wealthy business owners from downtown, because it was like close enough to be able to be close to your business, but far enough away so that you could have more land and the views, really build whatever you want. So William Lemp, so Billy Lemp's younger brother, built another mansion called Cragwald, which is a stone mansion. He built Cragwald in the same year as the chalet, as Allswell was built, but I do not have any more information about Cragwald other than that it is also still there, privately owned, and in good shape.
It is approximately 11,000 square foot home.
And it's giant.
Embracing the ideals of the arts and crafts movement.
It's giant.
It was built by Edwin, the youngest son.
Correct.
Who actually was the last one to die.
And
which is pretty amazing considering what I'm about ready to tell you.
That's about all. I could go on about chalets, but I think pretty much everyone knows what a chalet looks like. Maybe not that we have them here, but now you know that there is one in St. Louis.
So this Cragwall looks like a Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian house on one side, and then it's got.
But it's got a tower, right?
It's got a tower.
Yeah, there's stone, and it's crazy looking.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Interesting. So going back to Billy, who built All's Well, even though all was not well.
Mm-hmm.
Though maybe all was well for him because he found someone dumb enough to remarry him.
Oh, really?
In 1915, he married Ellie Kohler Lemberg.
And she moved into Allswell.
Correct.
Okay.
Her family established the American Brewing Company, which later became Excelsior Brewing. Billy converted the Lemp Mansion into offices for the brewery and then lived full-time at the chalet with Ellie. Mm-hmm. But in 1919, with the advent of Prohibition and a number of local breweries banding together to form a conglomerate, Billy could no longer keep the brewery going. In 1920, he sold the company and the brewery complex to the Griesedick Beverage Company, which eventually became Falstaff Brewing Corporation, taking that name from one of the original Lemp family beers.
Okay.
The whole enterprise had been valued at $7 million before Prohibition, and he sold it for just a little over $500,000.
So because, I mean, other breweries were able to make it through, right?
He just was a shit human and had no business sense.
Okay.
Billy also closed up the chalet at this time and moved into the Chase Park Hotel in St. Louis. In 1922, he shot himself with a revolver. And that's all I gotta say about that.
Hold up. So PBR owns Falstaff.
Oh.
If you're a baby boomer, there's a chance you enjoyed Falstaff. And if you didn't, your mom or dad did. So by 1975, production had dropped by 70%, and it was named after the Shakespearean character Sir John Falstaff, which I love. And I love this. This is from, I think, probably St. Louis radio or something, KXRB. I don't know if it's in St. Louis, but anyhow, the author says, my dad didn't realize how high class of a sounding beer he was drinking back there on that little Minnesota farm, which maybe this is from Minnesota because that is where my dad grew up, and I definitely know what Falstaff is. So it says things didn't go well in the 1970s. Consolidation was sweeping through the industry. The original company was purchased in 1975, and before long, plants started closing. It was phased out, and Falstaff died in May of 2005. So it does not still exist, but it existed until then. There you go. Falstaff beer no longer exists. It was retired. Falstaff was based on a Shakespearean character, at least the name was, which is odd because it was sold from Lemp, which was German.
So to wrap this all up, there were other tragedies in the Lemp family.
There were.
Yes.
There were. Do we have to end on a sad note?
Yeah. So this is what I'm reading from an author named Troy Taylor, who has written more than 125 books about ghost crime and the unexplained in America.
Well, we're here because of Scandal. So we've only hit how many of the deaths in the Lemp family? Two. The father and the son.
Yes.
Okay. So continuing.
Well, at least self-inflicted.
Or at least closing it out. Yeah. Yeah.
So the youngest child, Elsa. Mm-hmm. Elsa was 23 when her mother died. Her mother, Julia, died 2 years after father committed suicide. William Sr.'s estate was divided among the children, all 7 of them. So they each got 1/7 of, apparently it was more like $7 to $10 million.
This was when it was still a lot. So this is past pre-prohibition.
Pre-prohibition,
right. Okay.
So this made Elsa the wealthiest unmarried woman in St. Louis.
Okay.
And then under the terms of her mother's will, she also received an additional $100,000 when she married. she apparently sounds like she was kind of a badass. She joined the suffrage movement and worked for the woman's right to vote. Was the founder of the first suffragette society in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
She did become fascinated with spiritualism, which was very big in that time period.
Mm-hmm.
So she would hold seances at the Lemp mansion, and she also became